The vast darkness of space was silent, but the ships moving through it were not. A massive alien armada, stretching for miles, glided toward its target, Earth. The Galactic Dominion, rulers of half the galaxy, had decided that this small blue planet would belong to them. Admiral Virik stood at the command center of the flagship, Dreadfang. His reptilian eyes scanned the holographic map of the solar system. He saw Earth, far ahead, a tiny dot compared to the mighty fleet under his control. He let out a chuckle. "This will be over quickly," he said to his second-in-command, Captain Lirek. Lirek, smaller but just as ruthless, nodded. The humans won't even have time to beg. The fleet was unstoppable. Hundreds of warships, each armed with weapons capable of destroying entire continents. They had conquered dozens of planets before, and Earth would be no different. As the Armada passed Jupiter, a junior officer spoke up. "Sir, we are detecting something strange." Virik frowned. "Strange. Explain." "There are unknown signals, but we can't locate their source. They appear and disappear randomly." Virik waved his hand. "Ignore it. Probably space debris or background radiation." The officer hesitated. "But sir, the signals are moving, almost like they are watching us." Virik narrowed his eyes. Watching? That was nonsense. No human ship had even left their planet in over a century. They were primitive, weak, and isolated. There was no way they could be spying on the Armada. "Keep moving. Focus on the mission," Virik ordered. The fleet moved forward, reaching Mars' orbit. The red planet hung below them like a silent observer. Mars was lifeless, abandoned long ago by humans when their colonies failed. There was no threat here. But then, without warning, a message appeared on every screen in the fleet. A voice, deep and calm, spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Turn back now. This is your only warning." Silence fell over the command center. Officers exchanged nervous glances. Virik's jaw clenched. "Who is this?" he growled. No response. The message vanished as quickly as it had appeared. Lirek hissed. "A human trick. They think they can scare us." Virik nodded. "They are fools. Continue forward." But just as the fleet began moving again, one of the Dominion's warships vanished. No explosion, no distress call, no debris. One moment, the ship was there. The next, it was gone. "What just happened?" Lirek shouted. Officers scrambled to check sensors. "We don't know, sir. The ship just disappeared." Virik's claws tapped the metal table. "Scan the area. I want answers." The scanners found nothing. There were no enemy ships, no energy weapons, no black holes. Nothing. Then, another ship disappeared. This time, the crew screamed through the comms for a brief second, then silence. Panic spread across the fleet. The mighty Dominion Armada, the most powerful force in the galaxy, was being hunted. Virik slammed his fist on the console. Shields up. Weapons ready. The warships powered up their defenses. Blasters, missiles, and rail cannons locked onto empty space. Then something even stranger happened. A new message appeared, not on their screens, but inside their heads. A voice, colder than before, whispered, "You were warned." Every alien on the bridge felt their blood freeze. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Virik felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The disappearance of the first two ships was only the beginning. The fear that had begun to spread across the fleet continued to grow. It was impossible for the Armada to ignore it now. The very foundations of their confidence were starting to crack. Admiral Virik stood at the front of the command center, his hands gripping the edge of the console tightly. His sharp eyes scanned the vast emptiness of space, looking for any sign of what had just happened. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. "We need to find out what's going on," Virik muttered under his breath. "We can't keep losing ships like this." Captain Lirek, standing beside him, looked out at the dark void ahead. "It makes no sense, Admiral. We've searched every inch of space around us, and there's nothing. Not even a trace of debris." "Then how do you explain it?" Virik snapped. "Two ships gone without a trace. It's as if they vanished into thin air." There was a long silence in the room, and Virik could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. His officers had always been trained to face danger head-on. But this was something different, something that couldn't be fought with weapons or strategy. "Maybe it's the humans," suggested Lirak, his voice low. "Their technology. We know it's not as advanced as ours, but we've underestimated them before." Virik's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. The humans have nothing that could do this." He turned sharply. "Prepare the fleet to continue. We're going to Earth, whether they want us there or not." But just as he was about to give the order, the voice appeared again, this time louder and clearer, as if it was coming from inside their very minds. "You were warned," the voice said, almost mocking them. This time, the voice wasn't just a simple message. It carried an undeniable weight, as if it held power far beyond what the aliens could comprehend. It made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Lirak stiffened. "That's not just a warning. It's a threat." "We're not afraid of threats," Virik said coldly. "It's just a human trick. They're trying to scare us. They failed before, and they'll fail again." But as he spoke, his confidence began to shake. How could he be so sure? Two ships were gone, and there was nothing but an empty void to show for it. And now, this mysterious message. The entire fleet was on edge, waiting for the next move. Every officer on every ship was glued to their screens, their hands hovering over their weapons and shields, ready to react at a moment's notice. But the seconds dragged on in tense silence, and nothing happened. It wasn't until the third ship disappeared that the true horror of the situation began to sink in. This time, there were no screams, no signals, no warning at all. One moment, the ship was there, and the next, it was gone. "Admiral, we've lost another ship," an officer shouted in panic. Virik didn't respond immediately. He was too busy staring at the screen, where the empty space where the ship had been was now nothing but blackness. There were no signs of a struggle, no energy signatures, just nothing. "Send a fleet-wide message," he said, his voice cold but firm. "All ships, retreat to a safe distance. We can't fight what we don't understand." Lirak looked at Virik with disbelief. "Retreat, sir? We have the most powerful fleet in the galaxy. Why should we retreat?" "Because," Virik said slowly, his voice low, "whatever is out there, it's something we've never seen before. And I'm not willing to risk losing any more ships without knowing what we're up against." But even as he gave the order to retreat, Virik knew deep down that it might already be too late. The fleet started to move back, slowly at first, then faster as panic began to spread. But then, just as the ships were turning, another message echoed through the ship's comm systems. This time, it was clearer than ever, and it wasn't just a voice, it was a presence. "You will not leave. You are not welcome here." The message cut off abruptly, and every ship in the fleet felt the same wave of dread wash over them. It was as if the very space around them had become alive, and the aliens could feel its cold, unforgiving presence. Suddenly, every ship's engine sputtered, and the fleet came to an immediate halt. The ships were completely immobilized. "What's happening?" Lirak screamed. "We can't move." The engineers scrambled to fix the problem, but it was clear that something was blocking them from leaving. A force they couldn't see, a power they couldn't understand, was keeping them in place. Virik stood frozen, his mind racing. He had never felt so helpless. The fleet, the pride of the galactic dominion, was now a sitting target. It was as if the entire galaxy was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. But Virik didn't need to look at the view screen to know what was coming. He could feel it. The end of their invasion was near, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. And that was when they saw it, the first sign of what was truly out there. A single human ship appeared from the darkness. But it wasn't just any ship. This one was unlike anything they had ever seen. The ship glowed with an unnatural light, as if it were alive, pulsating with power. And as the Armada stared at it, they realized something terrifying. This ship wasn't afraid of them. The alien fleet hung motionless in space, trapped by an unseen force. Panic spread like wildfire among the crew. Some officers tried to restart their engines. Others scanned for threats, but their sensors returned only one result: a single human ship. Admiral Viric's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. His mind raced with questions. How could one human ship disable an entire fleet? What kind of technology was this? The Dominion had fought hundreds of species, but nothing like this had ever happened before. "Give me a full analysis," Viric ordered, his voice sharp. His officers scrambled to obey. A few moments later, Captain Lirac turned toward him, his scales a dull gray, a sign of deep fear among their kind. "Admiral," Lirac said, his voice barely above a whisper, "this ship, it doesn't match any human records we have. It's not like their standard warships. There are no known weapons, no energy spikes, no life signs. It's empty." Viric's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Something is controlling it." Before Lirac could respond, the ship moved. It didn't activate thrusters. It didn't emit heat. It simply glided forward, as if space itself was carrying it. "That's not natural," one of the officers whispered, horror creeping into his voice. Viric clenched his fists. He refused to be afraid. The Dominion did not fear humans. They were weaker, slower, and less advanced. This had to be an illusion, a trick to make them hesitate. "Fire at will," Viric commanded. "Destroy it." The warships responded instantly. Beams of plasma and torpedoes streaked toward the human vessel. Hundreds of weapons fired in perfect sync. It was an attack that had wiped out entire planets before. And yet, nothing happened. The projectiles vanished just before hitting the ship. The plasma beams flickered out of existence. The torpedoes disappeared, as if swallowed by the void. A heavy silence filled the command deck. No one dared to speak. "Admiral," Lirac said finally, his voice shaking, "our weapons, they aren't working." Viric refused to accept it. Fire again. The fleet unleashed another devastating attack. More energy beams, more missiles, all vanished. The alien officers watched in horror. Their greatest weapons were worthless. Then, without warning, the human ship spoke. A deep, emotionless voice echoed through every ship in the fleet. It wasn't a transmission. It wasn't coming from speakers. It was inside their heads. "You should not have come here." Every officer on every ship froze. The voice was not human. It was something more. Something ancient. Something powerful. Viric gritted his teeth. Is this a new human technology? Some kind of telepathic weapon? "No, Admiral," Lirac whispered. "I don't think this is human at all." The human ship moved again, gliding closer. Its dark surface shimmered, as if it wasn't made of metal, but something else, something alive. Suddenly, one of the Dominion warships vanished. No explosion, no wreckage. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. Shouts of fear filled the command deck. "We're under attack. Find out what happened." Shields up. But shields didn't matter. They were not fighting an enemy they could understand. Then the voice returned, colder than before. "You will not leave." Viric's heart pounded in his chest. For the first time in his life, he felt fear. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had crushed empires. They were the masters of war. And yet, they were powerless against this. "Admiral," Lirac whispered, "we need to surrender." Viric turned sharply, his eyes burning with rage. Surrender? To a single ship? Never. But deep down, He knew the truth. This wasn't just a battle. This was a warning. The human ship was not simply defending Earth. It was something far worse. And the Dominion had just made the greatest mistake in its history. Panic spread across the Dominion fleet. The bridge of every warship was filled with alarm sirens, flashing lights, and the desperate voices of officers shouting for answers. But there were no answers. The human ship did not fire weapons. It did not launch fighters. It simply existed, and in its presence, the most powerful fleet in the Dominion's history was helpless. Admiral Viric's claws dug into the armrests of his chair. He had fought in dozens of wars. He had conquered civilizations that begged for mercy. He had never lost a battle. But now he felt something he had not felt since he was a young soldier. Fear. The warship that had vanished, where had it gone? No explosion, no debris, no sign that it had ever existed. One of his officers stammered, his voice trembling. "Admiral, our sensors detect nothing where the warship was. No wreckage, no energy readings. It's as if it was erased from existence." Viric's tail twitched in frustration. "That is impossible." "Then where is it, sir?" another officer whispered. The command deck fell silent. No one knew. The human ship did not stop. It moved slowly, gliding through space like a predator watching its prey. Every time it came close to a Dominion vessel, that vessel vanished. One by one, their warships disappeared, devoured by something they could not understand. Admiral Viric turned to Captain Lirek, his most trusted officer. "We need to leave. Now." Lirek's eyes widened. "Retreat." "Admiral, if we run, we will lose our honor." Viric snarled. "Honor? We are losing ships without a fight. This is not a battle. It's an execution." But retreat was not so simple. The entire fleet was frozen. Their engines were still offline. Viric slammed his fist against the control panel. "Find me a way out of this. Now." A technician's voice broke through the chaos. "Sir, there's something on our hull." Viric's blood turned to ice. "What?" The technician's claws trembled as he displayed the external cameras. The main screen flickered, showing the hull of the Dominion flagship. Something was crawling on it. It wasn't metal. It wasn't a drone. It wasn't a creature. It was shadow. Black, shapeless forms slithered across the ship's surface. They moved like liquid, like living darkness, spreading over the hull as if they were feeding on the ship itself. Then the lights flickered. One by one, the control panels went dark. The power systems failed. Officers screamed as the ship's energy drained away, as if something was sucking the life out of it. Then the voice returned. "You were warned." The words echoed inside their minds. It was not spoken through the ship's speakers. It was inside their heads. Every soldier, every officer, all of them heard it. Admiral Viric's heart pounded. "We surrender," he shouted desperately. "Do you hear me? We surrender." The voice did not answer. The human ship moved closer. The shadow on their hull grew. Then, everything turned black. Darkness swallowed the Dominion flagship. Admiral Viric opened his eyes, but he saw nothing. No flashing alarms. No emergency lights. No crew. Only blackness. His breathing was loud in his own ears. His claws tapped against the chair, feeling the cold metal, proving that he was still here. But where was everyone else? Then, a sound. A whisper. It came from all around him. From the void itself. A low murmur, like 1,000 voices speaking at once, just beyond his understanding. Viric's instincts screamed at him to run, but there was nowhere to go. He forced his voice to remain strong. "Who are you?" The whispering stopped. Then one voice spoke. "You were warned." Viric's blood turned cold. He had heard this voice before, just before his ships began to disappear. "Where am I?" he demanded. The darkness did not answer. Then a dim light flickered ahead. It was weak, like a dying ember, but enough to reveal something terrifying. Bodies. His crew. They floated in the void, lifeless, their eyes wide open in silent horror. Hundreds of them. Thousands. A deep pressure crushed Vurick's chest, a feeling he had never known before. It was not battle. It was not war. It was something far worse, a force beyond his understanding. A shape moved in the darkness. It was not a ship. It was not metal. It was something else, something ancient and watching. It was bigger than his mind could comprehend, stretching across the void like a living shadow, moving without sound, without light. And then he understood. The human warship was not a ship at all. It was a trap, a gate, and his fleet had walked straight into it. A deep voice spoke again, calm and emotionless. You came to conquer, but you do not understand what waits beyond the veil. Vurick tried to move, but his body felt frozen. The whispers returned, growing louder, as if the darkness itself was speaking. Your kind believed it could take anything, that it could go anywhere, but some places are forbidden. The bodies of his crew began to crumble into dust, vanishing into the void. Vurick struggled, but his body refused to obey. What do you want? He growled. The shadows moved, and the voice whispered in his mind. We want nothing, but you took the first step into the abyss, and now you will not return. The last thing Vurick saw was the human ship, still there, still silent. Then the darkness swallowed him whole. The Dominion fleet was gone. Every admiral, every commander, every warship vanished. The last known transmission from Admiral Vurick's flagship had been a scream, not of pain, not of rage, but of pure terror. And then, silence. Across the Dominion's homeworld, chaos erupted. Grand Strategist Malgrith, the highest-ranking military leader in the Dominion, stood in the war chamber, staring at the empty holoscreen. No signals, no distress calls, no survivors. How is this possible? Malgrith's voice was low, controlled, but the officers around him were terrified. One moment, the fleet was near Mars. An intelligence officer stammered. Then, every ship ceased to exist. Malgrith turned his cold, reptilian eyes toward the technician. Ceased to exist. The officer swallowed. We detected no battle, no explosions, no debris. It's like they were erased. Whispers filled the war chamber. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds, destroyed fleets, enslaved species. Nothing had ever stopped them before. But now something had stopped them, something they could not see. Malgrith took a slow breath, controlling his fear. Are we certain it was the humans? A communications officer hesitated. We don't know. The fleet was approaching Earth. Then something intercepted them near Mars. Malgrith's claws tightened. Intercepted by what? The room was silent. Send another fleet, an officer finally said. Twice the size. We must. No. Malgrith's voice was sharp, and the chamber froze. He was not a fool. Something had destroyed an entire invasion force without firing a single shot. Sending another fleet blindly would be suicide. Then, what do we do? Someone whispered. Malgrith turned to the intelligence officer. Pull every record, every intercepted human transmission, every old archive. I want to know if there was any warning. The officer nodded, working quickly. For hours, Malgrith waited. His claws tapped against the cold metal table, his tail curled tight in nervous anticipation. His entire empire demanded answers. Finally, the officer turned, his face pale. We found something, he said. His hands trembled as he placed an old human broadcast on the central holoscreen. It was a message, sent decades ago, before the Dominion had even noticed Earth. The screen flickered, and a human male appeared, an old scientist. His voice was calm, explaining something in Earth's language. The Dominion's translation software quickly adapted. Malgrith listened. At first, it seemed meaningless. Quantum mechanics, space-time distortions, strange energy fields. But then, and thus, the barrier around our solar system remains stable. Any object passing through unshielded will experience total molecular disintegration. The room went silent. Malgrith's heart pounded. The humans knew. They had known all along. The scientist continued. Our deep space probes confirmed that this field is not natural. It is not a simple phenomenon of the universe. It was placed here. Something, long ago, built a containment system around our solar system. A chill ran through Malgrith's spine. The scientist's face turned grim. We do not know who built it. We do not know why it exists. But our tests confirm that any large object, especially metallic constructs, disappear when crossing the boundary. Small probes return distorted readings, sometimes showing glimpses of things that should not exist. The Dominion officers looked at one another, fear in their eyes. Malgrith finally understood. The fleet had never faced the humans. It had crossed the barrier, and whatever was on the other side had taken them. The recording ended. Silence filled the war chamber. Finally, an officer whispered the question everyone was afraid to ask. Did the humans build it? Malgrith shook his head. No. His voice was cold, his body stiff. Then, what did? No one spoke. Outside the war chamber, the Dominion's vast empire felt smaller than ever before. Something ancient watched from the darkness, something powerful. And Earth was not its prison. Earth was its bait. For the first time in its history, the Dominion did nothing. No retaliation, no second fleet, no declaration of war. Just silence. Grand strategist Malgrith had spent weeks analyzing every piece of data, listening to every intercepted human transmission, and reviewing every old Dominion archive. But there was no explanation, no logical reason for what had happened. The fleet had been swallowed whole before it even reached Mars. And yet, there had been no battle, no debris, no distress signals. It was as if the ships had ceased to exist. Malgrith's advisors were divided. Some wanted to attack immediately, claiming the humans must have a hidden weapon. Others whispered that they should never approach Earth again. Malgrith made his decision. The Dominion would never invade Earth. Not because of fear of the humans, not because of honor, but because he knew something far worse was watching. Still, he needed answers. He needed to know what had taken his fleet. So, he sent a probe. Not a warship, not a fleet, just a small, unarmed drone, equipped with the Dominion's most advanced stealth technology. It was designed to scan the area around Mars and return undetected. The Dominion watched in silence as the probe approached the solar system. Every admiral, every officer, every soldier in the Empire waited. The probe sent back its first transmission, a blurry image of Mars in the distance. A second transmission, the empty void of space where the fleet had once been. Then, a third transmission. The image was wrong. The stars in the background were distorted. The darkness of space seemed to move. Something massive was there. The transmission flickered. And then, the probe was gone. The Dominion's war chamber erupted in chaos. Officers shouted over each other, trying to explain what had happened. Some claimed it was a malfunction. Others insisted the humans had discovered the probe and destroyed it. But Malgrith saw the truth. It wasn't malfunctioning. It wasn't destroyed by humans. Something had taken it, and it had been waiting. Malgrith's blood ran cold. He turned to his officers, his voice calm but firm. From this moment on, Earth is to be avoided at all costs. The officers stared, some in confusion, some in fear. Tell our forces that Earth is worthless to the Dominion, Malgrith continued. Spread false reports. Say that the humans are too primitive, that their planet holds no value, that there is no reason to ever go near their solar system. One of his advisors hesitated. But why not warn the others? Why not tell the truth? Malgrith looked at him coldly. If the truth spreads, fools will try to test it, he said, And we will lose more ships, more people, more than we can understand. His claws tapped against the war table. This is not about humans anymore, he whispered. This is about what lies beyond Mars. The officers fell silent. Outside the war chamber, the Dominion's vast empire continued as normal, conquering, expanding, spreading across the stars. But deep in the heart of the Dominion's high command, a secret was buried, a secret that no Dominion officer would dare speak. Earth was not to be touched, not because of the humans, but because of what was waiting for those who tried. And so, the Dominion turned its fleets away, not in defeat, but in fear of the unknown. Yet on Earth, the humans carried on, completely unaware of what had happened. They never knew about the Dominion's invasion fleet. They never knew that Mars had become a graveyard for something unseen. They never knew they were being protected, or perhaps they did know, and they were waiting too.